Hi everybody, how's it going? I'm just fiddling with audio a little bit, but we are live now. Hi, welcome so much. That's the state of my brain at the moment. Welcome so much to the We Should Talk live stream. Today I'm super excited. We're going to be looking at the alpha build of the game that we initially worked on, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the transition from that version of the game into the final version, which is actually coming out next week on the 16th, and I'm super duper excited. So this is also kind of a celebration stream as we kind of gear up for launch week, and I'm really excited. Yeah, I know, right? It's real. Oh my God. So hi everyone, my name is Francesca. I worked on the 3D character art and also animations for the game. I am joined by my lovely team. I'll let y'all introduce yourselves.
Jordan, you want to go first since you're on the top?
Go for it.
Ooh, I am on the top. I am Jordan. I am the narrative designer and writer for the game.
Cool. Hi, I am below Francesca in the video thing, so I'm gonna go next. I'm Carol Mertz. I am the producer of We Should Talk, and I also worked on design and development.
Hello everybody, I'm Nobunita Bomick, and I'm the art director for this game. And I have my cutie blue with me.
So cute.
Show off.
For everybody watching, please be aware that it is 5 a.m. where Nobo is in Bangladesh, and she is so sleepy and snuggling her little cutie blue. So I think she deserves a round of Twitch applause for being awake for this.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And as we usually do, I would like everyone to, since the game is set in a bar, we're each going to go around and also introduce what we are drinking during our stream. So this time I'm having a really sleepy Friday, so I'm actually drinking third coffee of the day in my tiny aquarium mug. So that's
nice.
Me.
I have a beautiful bottle of soju that I ripped the brand name because I didn't know how stream works.
Hit me up at 555 something. I am drinking a spiked seltzer with added. Oh my gosh, it's so invisible.
All of your drinks are always invisible, huh?
That's cool. I mean, who knows? Who knows what this is? It could be moonshine. it could be grenadine in 5 tiny shot glasses. Who's to say? But yes, it's most likely spiked seltzer with lime juice.
Nice.
Yay.
Yeah, I don't have anything. I just have water.
You just have cutie blue.
That's okay. Stay hydrated. As a slight tangent on moonshine, our publisher is based in Erie, Pennsylvania, and there's a distillery that makes apple pie moonshine, and it's incredible. So I highly, Nobo's face is like upset. Carol's face is like, yeah.
I've had it.
This is very descriptive of our team.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, that's true. Chad is also drinking coffee. Yeah, I'm like, it's been a 3 coffee kind of day for me. But yeah, super excited to do this stream. As I said, it's both a look back at our journey of the game and of our team, but also it's like a celebration of the game's launch, which is next week. So I'm super excited. So really quickly before we jump into this, so ways to support us moving into launch week. We are super active on Twitter, and you can help us get the word out. You can also wishlist the game on Steam, which helps us with visibility. And you can also find us, I think, on the console storefronts now, right, as well? Is that right?
Yes, on both Xbox and Switch. We're available for pre-order on Xbox. And for wishlist on Switch. So we'll be going live on PlayStation soon. This is kind of like a quiet, so we'll have more announcements on the PlayStation release very soon.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It feels kind of unreal, but super duper excited. So we hope you are too. Yeah, I'm like super hype.
Hype.
Yeah, so I guess just to kick us off, so if in case we have anyone joining us who doesn't know a whole lot about the game, Carol, could you give us like general sort of elevator pitch, like what is We Should Talk?
Yeah, absolutely. So We Should Talk is a short form experimental narrative game where you have to think carefully about the words you choose. It is a game that recreates a natural feeling conversation in a bar environment, which is obviously what we all miss desperately right now. So the idea is that you're having different conversations with people that you have different kinds of relationships with, and it's about exploring what conversation means and what kinds of things you could say and how those things impact the way that those conversations pan out, and sometimes ultimately the way those relationships pan out. So it's very much a game about exploring intimacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess like since we're going to be talking a little bit about retrospective and like the origin story of the game and of the project, yeah, maybe if we could, while I get this started, if we could talk a little bit about like general themes we were interested in exploring with this project and sort of other inspirations.
Yeah, so one of the things that we wanted to, the feeling of what it means to like simulate like romance in the game with using mechanics is a thing that we always wanted to really explore as like an early version, like an early inspiration for the game. And then we looked at games like Emily is Away and other narrative-based games that were kind of changing the way that we experienced conversations through mechanics, and kind of used that as kind of a jumping point of where our thought processes were.
Yeah, it was really very much about wanting to create. So, I mean, I guess, do you want to talk about like the class structure? Because this originally
I think
game.
It's such an important part of where this game came from, right? And sort of the circumstances in which it was initially created. So
yeah. So for those who haven't been following development, the four of us plus two other folks, Kat Aguiar and Jack Schlesinger, all met at the NYU Game Center for our master's in fine arts degrees in game design. And during our second semester there, so we'd only known each other for something like 3 or 4 months, we were enrolled into a class called Studio 2, which is about creating a game in a semester with a team of people. And the idea was that you form a team around a shared challenge, a shared creative challenge. And so there was one day when we all just wrote different ideas on the board of like things that we wanted to solve. And the problem that we all wanted to solve, that we all came together around, was we wanted to figure out how to make a game that subverted the idea of transactional romance in games. And by that we mean a game that looks at romance differently from how most games treat romance, in that we didn't want to focus the relationship on gift giving or saying the right thing, things like that. We were really excited to explore what other kinds of approaches we could take.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you said, like that was the shared interest that our team came together through. And I think, as we expanded the game and as we worked through our design decisions of taking it from that initial version to the final, I think, those remained kind of our main design pillars that we were centered around, and really influenced how we updated the content as well. So let's talk a little bit about the dialogue mechanic here. If I'm just gonna, I decided to be flirty, so I'm gonna play. I'm gonna try to play differently than I did last time, so we see some different branches.
Cool.
Let's talk about the sentence spinner a little bit.
Yeah, I think my my view is a little off, but yeah. So it looks like we are. So the sentence spinner came out of a series of a handful of different prototypes of like what are the different ways that we can express different feelings in conversation. I think we went from, the original idea was that you were going to be a bartender, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At a bar. And you were supposed to be the one observing the people around you. And you had to figure out if you wanted to build conversations with the people at the bar, or if you just wanted to serve them drinks and figure out how to learn about them through drinks and things. And we decided that actually in itself was very transactional. Like people are literally transacting with you to purchase drinks from you, and you were trying to garner information from their order, which is interesting, and we really like that idea. But ultimately, we decided to focus more on the conversations at the bar. And so what we did was, over the course of I think four solid weeks, we made dozens of prototypes of different ways that you could have conversations. And whether that was, I think we had some blackout poetry, we had some like Guitar Hero style Twitch-based anxiety conversations, and then we finally, this wound up coming out of this idea that there was a sentence that most of the sentence was in place, but one word just kept moving, and you had to stop it on the word that you felt. So the word would complete the sentence no matter which word it was, but it changed the meaning of the sentence entirely. And that was the beginnings of what we now know as the sentence spinner, where every piece of the sentence spins and changes and keeps the sentence coherent, but changes it ultimately for the ultimate experience, for your response.
Ultimate experience.
The ultimate experience. Sorry. I'm also very tired today. Okay. I'm just like, what are words even?
Yeah, so right now I'm at the end of the initial like intro bartender conversation, and I actually wanted to take this opportunity to jump to the alpha so we can take a look at visually how the game has changed, but we can also take a look at this specific character in this conversation and how that adjusted as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and swap over, but yeah, I was wondering if Nobo, if you could give us some insight into like alpha art and how you adjusted sort of the creative vision of the game.
I hope my fan doesn't block out most of my words.
No,
but
sounds good.
I remember like during our development, we really wanted to focus on like stylized models, stylized art, and like because I was really new to 3D art, and I remember Kat and like Jessica, we were just like trying to figure out a really good way to make it happen. So when I started working on the new version, I was like heavily influenced by Wolf Among Us, especially the bar scene. They had like really contrasting colors, and I was thinking that maybe we could do something similar.
Really quick, already you're gonna notice a huge difference. Are we live quite yet?
1 second.
Sorry, we're seeing Francesca's screen a little bit clearer than y'all are.
1 second. I had to.
Amazing.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to reopen the window because it disconnected a little bit. So when I make this transition, y'all might see a little bit of double for a second of the stream. Let's see. Yeah, I'm in oblivion at 1 second. There it is. All right. So this is the transition worked kind of. So here's the initial intro scene for the alpha, which you'll notice is actually outside of the bar, which is very, very different from how it currently looks.
We had so much more movement in the original game, which we completely ripped out of the current version.
And I
just thinking about. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think part of that is that we were when we were initially developing this alpha version, and that we were first working on this, I think we didn't really know yet that it was going to stay as a short form narrative game, and I think we were kind of thinking about like, how can we make this feel like a larger experience? So I think like even the physical space is bigger, and you are outside of the bar at first, and there's a lot more movement around the space as well. And I think like once we really committed to this idea of like, this is a short form and very curated experience, I think we felt a lot more comfortable like, focusing, not only like the content, but also like the space and like the camera angles and everything as well.
Yeah. I think from a practical perspective too, and you'll see this once you hit start and we take a look at, how the game moves. you know, all of us
Going
are
in.
fairly new to 3D game development, and as you'll see, it's you know, the movement doesn't feel as professional as a you know a game made by several experienced developers. And so we were like trying to think of ways that we could get around that awkwardness in motion as we move around the bar, and like because we didn't really want to have to necessarily animate the character walking and figure out like, do we have controls, like character controls in this game? That doesn't seem necessary. We realized, you know, this whole experience could just happen with you sitting in place at the bar instead of you being the one going around and talking to different people. Narratively, experientially, everything made so much more sense if we aren't moving around the way that we had originally planned to.
Even
and
the
so
way
ultimately,
that we, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, ultimately, even though that really simplified the way that, you know, the game functionally works, it made it a lot tighter and a lot more of a solid professional feeling experience just with that one design choice.
Even with the way that we the player chooses who to talk to. You know, in the current version of the game, that all happens in conversations. The way that you talk to people then kind of chooses who you go to next. But as you see in this version, we just kind of had a character select screen where you're just picking ideas of people with a short little kind of mini bio of who they are.
Yeah, and I want to point out one of the major differences that you'll notice already is that the UI is completely different. So when we were initially making this, actually all of our UI elements were 3D to kind of like coexist within this 3D space. And we since
and the phone was
them.
a floating screen.
Yeah.
Just in outer space. It was just a projection. It was the future times.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's definitely a big change that I think you'll notice. What?
I'm sorry, I forget. That really makes sense.
Sorry, you cut out a little bit.
At that time, it really made sense to make like 3D bubbles and 3D.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
Everything.
Our mentors even were like, well, if you're going to put this in a 3D space, because they were like, well, why don't you make it 2D? And we were like, well, you know, a lot of the people on our team want to practice their 3D skills.
Yeah.
So that's why we want to work in 3D. And they said, well, then you should have your UI be in 3D space so that it feels like a part of the world. And so that was where, you know, those 3D bubbles and UI elements came in. And we ultimately compromised by making them flat 2D elements that exist within the 3D world in the final release, but they don't have that depth and that like 3D look and feel the way that they do in this original alpha build.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I guess the other big difference is that this bartender character, so initially the way that we were writing this character and we designed this character to be like, you know, you're a regular at this bar and this character is like a really close friend who knows a lot about your life and is sort of, you know, really invested in your well-being and your emotions. So there's a lot more familiarity here. And I was wondering, Jordan, if you could speak to a little bit like why this shifted with the final design and how the two characters are different.
Yeah, it's interesting. The bartender character in both versions of the game are interesting to me because both from playtesting, those are two characters that I feel like I've gotten like a lot of positive feedback about. Like, I kind of think it's because we started this journey thinking about a game about a bartender, and so I feel like that kind of bled into what her design ended up being. But in the original version, there was a lot more pre-established rules of all of the relationships that you have. And we were kind of setting a stage for, even with your conversations with Sam, who I'm glad her name stayed the same, where this game starts off with your relationship in a tense place. Like we are telling you it is in a bad place. We are telling you all these things. Whereas in the new one, we wanted to be more of a representation of like the things that you say. We wanted the power to be a little bit more in the player's hands with regard to how the story progressed and who these people were. So having, you know, one character who's familiar with you, one that kind of knows you, and one that doesn't know you, is felt a little bit stronger than everybody knows you very well, except for this one stranger guy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, she was meant to be Ash, the alpha bartender was meant to be like your absolute best friend, and you are coming to visit her, right? And I remember when we would play test with her, with that, like this version, people would be like, "You don't know me like that. Like, why are you being so personal?" Which is just really interesting. I think that was another one of the reasons why we were like, well, maybe that's like, as an introductory character to the game, she makes more sense being more of a like kind acquaintance who can show you the ropes sort of situation, as opposed to oh, I'm really diving deep into this narrative and I have no idea who I am, but she does. She knows who I am.
Yeah.
Which I think also makes a big difference is in just like setting the scene.
Yeah, and I think something that this original version did struggle with was like how we like introduce the characters to you, because in this setting it's like this character knows the characters and has a big like, is that Dinah?
Yeah, Dinah's gonna start looking at the camera pretty soon.
That's
here.
okay.
She just put her face in front of her.
Yeah, and I think like there's a lot of very established relationships here, but you know, it felt weird to have you enter the space and have us like, I guess, onboard you onto those relationships. Yeah, so like the immediate familiarity with the bartender character and with your girlfriend Sam, I think was really off-putting for a lot of people. Yeah, and that was something we worked on a lot with the. I can see Dinah's little
There's
face.
just like little whiskers every once in a while.
Yeah, and I wanted to say also, so we do have quite a few folks watching and in chat, and if you do have questions about, you know, the game or any of our process, like please feel free to throw questions in there. Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in.
We're here. We're live and here for you.
Yeah.
This is a community stream, so oh my gosh, there's just straight up whiskers.
That's so cute.
Yeah, this we're doing this because of you. Like these community streams were as a thank you for our Kickstarter backers for being such a strong force of good for us during our Kickstarter campaign last month. And yeah, we just want to make sure that we give everybody an opportunity to connect with the game and connect with us and answer any of those questions that you have about our process. Because it is a unique process. The fact that, you know, this was the alpha and we never really expected it to go. I mean, we had ideas that we might want to continue development, but we also were students and it was a single semester project and we had no idea if we were going to ever continue and if we would ever get the opportunity or the support to do so. And I mean, as you all can see, like the alpha definitely is in a more rough state than the current release, but you can also see the sheer potential that it shows. This idea that the sentence spinner presents dialogue and narrative in a way that we've never seen in a game before, is what people got really excited about. And I remember specifically, I mean, Jordan, you mentioned that we were inspired by Emily is Away by Kyle Seeley. And I remember the first time we ever demoed this game in public, it was at the NYU Game Center end of year show, like the student showcase in 2018. And Kyle was there. Kyle showed up to play the games at the showcase and played our game and loved it and was like, so when are you going to release this? Keep me posted. Like, and we kept in touch and he gave us a lot of feedback and insight during development. And it's just like, it's amazing how much support we've gotten, even as, you know, a 3-month project. It inspired people to keep up with it and to encourage us to move forward with it, which is really cool.
Yeah, I remember that I couldn't be at the showcase, and y'all just like posted on Slack really excited. I was just like, Kyle Seeley played our game and like really liked it. And we were like, wow. And I think, yeah, we definitely owe a lot to, you know, the people and the moments like that gave us a lot of encouragement and told us that this was, you know, something that was interesting that people would really like. So yeah. I stopped here because I wanted to look at like this specific choice and like kind of the dynamics here. And I think like we really built off of dialogue choices like this in the final version, but this is a really like classic example of like, saying like, we should hang out more, and saying you should come over, I should come over, could or should, and then like try harder or come over. So, is it I or is it you? Like, who's the problem here? And then could versus should, it's like one of them is more wishy-washy, I feel like, and the other one is more action oriented. And then the same with like come over or try harder. Like try harder feels very general and doesn't have any like specific, I guess, like a specific action that you're taking in response to this, and like come over feels much more like actionable. And I think like we built off of this and played with this a lot in the final version as well.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to talk about the difference between the narrative and what we see in these first couple conversations in both versions of the games is that with the alpha version and the current version, We Should Talk like has a wide range of topics and kind of tones that it takes. It can be like lighthearted conversations or really intimate, like vulnerable conversations. However, in the alpha, we were, I think, less experienced at weaving in lighthearted conversations in there. So.
Well, you and I were both going through some shit.
Yeah. So in the alpha version of We Should Talk, I wrote all of the text and conversations, and Carol wrote all the in-person conversations, and we both were also going through some stuff. So as a result, every conversation in this version just is immediately heavy or immediately like overwhelming or immediately like just kind of hitting at the face of something.
Swap back over also.
Yeah, and it kind of also is shown with how the character relationships are, because one thing that we went through in the conversation with Sam over there is that like in this version, Sam really likes the bartender and like kind of barely knows them and thinks I kind of relate to their story. And in the other versions, like, oh, Sam, Ash, the bartender, they're hitting on me once it's really uncomfortable. And there are conversations of that kind of severity in the current version of We Should Talk, but not every conversation, because that makes a very different kind of experience and not kind of the one that we wanted, because not all conversation is like that, and conversation is nuanced.
People felt like it was just too heavy, and like it was especially with the conversations coming in from Sam being so serious, it felt like an unbalanced relationship. It felt like a very like almost aggressive relationship, because all of her conversations were very serious and people were struggling to understand why.
Like why you would
and
want
really
to engage,
really we were just trying to write interesting conversations that were topical and touched on the themes that we wanted to touch on without necessarily thinking about the emotional balance that might strike. So there's a question from chat that I'd like to touch on. Were there any ideas from the alpha that you liked but weren't able to carry through to the final version? And that's really interesting, because the alpha was so small, really, that I feel like we just took the alpha and like even there we kind of trimmed it just a little bit, but still added so much to the narrative that the release is just like alpha times 10. So other than maybe the movement that we had really tried to stick with for a while, I don't know that there was anything that we really abandoned necessarily. Did anybody feel that way?
Narratively, no. Because like you said, the current version for like especially narratively is like alpha times a million, like tens of thousands. The only thing that I can think of wasn't in the alpha. It's just I really wanted a joke to work when we were working on what is now the current version. And for days I worked on this joke that was supposed to be a play on the fact that we couldn't use brand names, and it just didn't make sense. And it's heartbreaking that it wasn't funny. It was so unfunny that it's not even funny to tell.
I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure I was the one who was like, this doesn't make sense, Jordan, we gotta cut it. And I felt really bad, but also it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
It was too deep a cut. It was too deep a cut.
It was trying to do something real good and did it in a way that didn't quite land.
Yeah, and I
appreciated the effort.
That's so funny. And I think like as you mentioned before, like a lot of the conversations that are in the alpha. Sorry, I'm realizing I think the music is a little loud, so I'm gonna turn it down. A lot of the discussions and like topics in the alpha, they are very heavy-handed, but they were based on a lot of, you know, personal experiences from the team. And I think like when we play tested, actually this is absolutely related to the question that was just asked, like, is there a lot of cut content? Yeah, we ended up like when we were playtesting, as we said, like some of these conversations were like too heavy at not the right time, or we needed the player to build up some level of familiarity with the setting and with with the characters and what was happening. So like a lot of those things did end up getting like shifted, I think, to like other points in the game, or cut or altered. So it was really like finding a nice balance as well.
One thing I realized that we did cut that is kind of a bummer was Jack Schlesinger, our like the original programmer and sound designer, had designed this beautiful spatial soundscape.
Yeah.
For when you move around the bar, and it was like all of the sounds were coming from objects in the scene, and it was just like this very thoughtfully designed, very like just immersive sound experience that, because of what we were mentioning before, how we moved everything so that you're just standing at the bar the entire time, like that, it was no longer relevant. It was no longer even, you know, usable, because we were no longer moving around the bar. So we still kept a lot of those same sounds, but we unfortunately weren't able to maintain that same like super immersive sound feel.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
In the alpha, you can hear cars in the background.
Sure. Yeah,
you can
like
hear them driving
the
past
outside bar
you.
sign. Yeah.
It's so cool. Related to audio, another question: were the music choices inspired by the narrative of the game or personal experiences?
Take it away, Nobo.
Yep, that's all Nobo.
Honestly, I just tried to like look for something that would match the atmosphere of the bar, because it's not like the typical I don't know, like very rustic bar. It was more
Hip.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why it was really fun looking for music for this free game. I'm glad that I made a playlist. So I hope the artist gets more followers and like people like their songs. Which is good. Yeah.
The music that ended up. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say. Yeah. Here we have Jimmy, and I do want to point out that like every single in-person character is so dramatically different from the alpha to release.
Should I go back to the alpha and we can meet the original stranger?
Yeah, let's take a look at the stranger first. What was his? Did we even give the stranger a name?
We are gonna find out.
I would love to. So I wrote this stranger, and it made people so uncomfortable.
It made me so uncomfortable.
And they hate him so much, because I hate him. This is every guy who's ever uncomfortably hit on me at a professional event. And like I was like,
I shouldn't be laughing, but I'm just.
I'm gonna read you so hard in this video game. And so you can kind of see that ire come through in this stranger, just like that. Like, oh wow, this guy is absolutely irredeemable. Where like he just comes out guns blazing, like, I'm gonna take you home tonight. It's like, no, you sure are not. Like, there's not even an option for me to say that, because in what world would that ever even happen? You can see like the default is I am not interested. Like
yeah, I think that's such a good point actually that I want to touch on, is like, you know, for like this default here, right, is kind of guiding you towards like, this guy's a creep. But like we do also want to let people like play out that, I don't know, I guess it's like a fantasy, right? Of like, you go to a bar and there's a mysterious stranger sitting in the corner. So like there are options here where you can be flirty instead, if you're like, oh, I'm like flattered by this attention. But also I think this was for Carol especially, but for the entire team, like this was a conversation that we had a lot of really mixed feelings about, of like, you know, should we even give you that option, or like, yeah, I don't know. It was very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a challenge to write these because I had to dig up a lot of really uncomfortable memories and then imagine what that creep who was going out of his way to make me feel uncomfortable would respond with if I said this. And so, you know, somebody in chat asked, were those kinds of guys the easiest to write? I would say, frankly, absolutely not, because it is forcing you anytime you're writing something from experience, and trying to capture an uncomfortable moment, you really have to relive that moment deeply and repeatedly. And I remember just being filled with rage while I was writing this conversation.
I love his little pointing of just like, hey,
Yeah.
like, I don't even know
people
you.
would be like, is he gonna slap me?
He's
Like,
just like,
what
hey.
is
Yeah.
this?
I think like in hindsight it definitely should have been like a pointing, but like it was just like, hey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were those question from chat, were those kind of guys the easiest to write? Yeah, I'm curious, like writing this character versus writing the X, right?
So I'd like to talk about Jimmy actually for a second, because the difference between these conversations is that Carol wrote one and I'm only made with the other, but there are some similarities in how Jimmy can act towards you, and I found that extremely difficult because this is not an experience that I can speak to, right? This is one where like the early versions of the Jimmy conversations just weren't hitting exactly where they needed to go, because like I had trouble understanding who that kind of guy would be, what that person would say, and that's one of the things that like I referred back to Carol specifically on, like what are the types of things that go through, and it made it more collaborative, of course, in that particular conversation, but it definitely made it more difficult for that side.
All right, I've swapped back, so we're gonna meet Jimmy now and see how this conversation is very, very different.
Yeah, so we gave Jimmy way more of a backstory, which I think immediately makes him more interesting.
Yeah, I think like if, for the old stranger, if you go down certain paths, like the branch that I just went down, so it says that like, you know, he recently had a breakup and is like, you know, it's implied that he's like, you know, had a divorce or something, like a very serious kind of breakup. So like that's why he's kind of hanging out at the bar. But like for most of the paths, I think you don't really get that background context. It's just this creepy dude at the bar who's like.
But even that background doesn't redeem the way that he's treating you.
Yes, exactly.
And you know, not to say that like certain things Jimmy can say are necessarily super forgivable. And I mean, like he's like, "Hey, I'm Daddy Baycare," like. That's a little like, weird, dude.
Hey,
like,
dude.
What are...
I was really proud of Daddy Baker.
You should be. It is, I think, the best word in the game.
Yeah.
But there's so many more options with this dialogue. There's so many more opportunities to treat him like a human and for him to treat you like a human. And really, I think Jimmy became one of the most multifaceted characters, even though pretty much every conversation with him is quite short. It can go in many different directions, so that when you replay it, if you go a different path, you'll learn more about Jimmy's experience and his background and his reasoning. And I think that's one of the really incredible things, Jordan, that you were able to do, is to actually give him some semblance of humanity when I was just tearing the concept of the creepy dude in the bar to shreds.
Yeah, I wanted Jimmy to be someone that you could like, but could also be someone that, like, depending on how that goes, could be that person that needs to be like handled.
Yeah.
Someone brought up $9 Old Fashioned. His name is that Jamal guy, and I'm like 80% sure this is my brother, like 80%. So hey, Jamal.
Nice.
But so I just want to talk about the bar right there. The menu actually represents the endings in the game, and what you can. The names of those endings are also all drinks that we saw in the bars that we were researching.
Yeah, because this bar is technically like it's set in Brooklyn, so these prices would be like
Never.
15, 16, $17.
Yeah. I mean, as you go up, like who would sell you a Sex on the Beach for $4? That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, that's like one of the few Easter eggs in the game. Is this is actually the list of all the possible endings, which I think is one of the things that's most exciting for folks to find out. Is like, oh, each one of those represents. Oh, cool. Yeah.
So you see,
sorry, no, go ahead. Please.
So I was saying, you see at the end of that Jimmy conversation that it took a completely different route where it's all generally his backstory and the things that he deals with on this day to day and corporate responsibilities as a person of color, which is like so much more interesting than whatever that stranger's name was before that.
He had a name.
I
think it was just the stranger. Caleb. Oh, that's right.
We're all like, Caleb.
Caleb. Or Chad, or yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, really quickly before we keep going, so we had like a fun question in chat from before. So, what is your favorite alcoholic drink? And I'm curious also, yeah, because I'm curious, like, what is your like general favorite, and then like when you actually go to a bar like this, what is the thing that you order?
Depends on the mood for me.
Yeah.
Same.
So my go-to is mojito, and if it's party, it's Jaeger bomb, and if I just want to drink a little bit, I'll go for it.
That is true. When the first time I think I hung out with Nobo after we met, you made me a Jaeger bomb. I'm remembering this now.
Yeah.
It's bringing back memories.
She would literally call it the Nobo drink.
Yep.
Yeah.
When we lived together, she just kept a bottle of Jaeger in the freezer for any time she wanted to just toss together a Nobo drink.
Yeah. They weren't fun.
Thank you, Nobo.
Yeah. We love you so much.
Yeah, I would say like my general go-to, I'm someone who doesn't really like sweet foods, but I love sweet drinks. So I love those, like when you go to the liquor store and you get those like things like blue drinks. I love that. I love those like weird things. Yeah. Have you ever had like
wine coolers?
No. No, I'm talking about like no. There's a specific one I used to like a lot. I don't know if they still sell it, but it was called like Hypnotic, and it was blue.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those like cheapo like party drinks. I love that.
I know a couple people in the chat are pretty familiar with Hypnotic, if my memory serves.
Yeah.
I like Vegemite guy. Ew.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, but in general, like and you've seen this in other streams, I'm like a sangria person, so I really like sangria. But if I go to a bar, it's usually whiskey and ginger. Yeah, that's my go-to.
When I go on, go ahead, Carol.
Oh, you can.
Because that makes more sense hierarchically.
I don't know. I am a beer person first and foremost, but I am also a mid-20s diagnosed gluten intolerant person.
That's so unfortunate.
Which sucks because I used to just drink PBR like wild. I was one of those people. But now I really like when I can find it. Like if I'm at a bar and they have Omission or another gluten-free beer, like that is my go-to. But otherwise for wine, I really like either if we're talking like summer months, Sauvignon Blanc. If we're talking winter months, Malbec, really good. If we're talking cocktail, I would do a gin and soda or perhaps a mojito if I'm feeling sassy. Yeah.
It's making me think of brunch.
Yeah, but I know. Oh my God, there was this Coco Roco was this place that we lived near in Park Slope that had these amazing brunch deals, and all their brunches came with free mojitos, and it was like the best deal you could find for brunch in Brooklyn. And we would just go there and get a little brunch drunk and eat a whole bunch of really amazing Peruvian food. Yeah, it's so good.
This is like a game retrospective stream, but it's also like a us retrospective stream.
Yeah.
Remembering our time, because like only Jordan is the only one who still lives in New York at this point. Like while we all met in Brooklyn, all of us except for Jordan and Jack have moved away. So it's kind of sad. We all miss each other.
my drink, which is neither of these are drinks that I've ever really shared with him, because we made a lot of mulled wine. Mulled wine is like a third one.
Yeah.
Yes.
And those were a problem when we started.
Yeah. I made 2 crock pots full of mulled wine for Christmas for myself this winter, and I drank them both by myself.
Good for you. Good for you.
When I go into a bar, I ask them if they have rosé, and if they don't look at me weird, that's what I get. But if they look at me weird, then I get a whiskey ginger.
Nice.
Cool. So I just hopped back over to the alpha. So right now you'll notice that we are playing through the same conversation, right? So after you talk with the stranger, Sam messages you like, hey, like, do you ever like hang out with, strangers or other people at the bar? So these are, 2 versions of this same sort of topic, but you'll see that they've been adjusted a lot in terms of how we're expressing the topic or the different dialogue options. Jordan, do you want to talk about like general, I guess, like theme or like topic updates between the versions?
Yeah, I think the main difference between this version and the current version is who Salmon is as a character is more mature and kind of more well-rounded as a character. Well, where this one is a lot more, there's a lot more accusations thrown and a lot more blame thrown in this version of the character. And that's not who we decided Sam was as a person later on. So it's more so taking it, asking you questions, feeling, I kind of feel like that makes me uncomfortable. Should that make me uncomfortable? Is this a thing that I should worry about? As opposed to, you shouldn't be doing this. Why are you doing this? And that's kind of the main difference of who Sam was. And someone in the chat said this game is like a relationship trainer. And one thing that we want out of this game is for people to think twice about the words that they choose, both in game and outside, and really be conscious with how you communicate with people, because it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Or also like how it's understood, right? There's so much context, like depending on the context of your relationship with this person and how they might be feeling, they might completely misinterpret something that you're trying to communicate. So
Yeah, I remember early on with this version of Sam, I mean, she does feel very two-dimensional. Also, we only had a few weeks to actually write this, so we were writing as quickly and as effectively as possible, and I'm just amazed that we did as much in as short of a period of time as we did. But I do remember that there were people who were like, yeah, no, Sam felt actually emotionally abusive, like very aggressive, very mean and accusatory, and like that wasn't necessarily our goal, but we, like I said, we were going through stuff and our minds were in a specific place, and we wrote based on the emotions that we were feeling at the time, because we were so exhausted because of grad school. I don't know if any of y'all have gone to grad school, but it is not an easy process.
I'm like still recovering.
So we're exhausted, trying to, cope with 18 credit hours, trying to cope with interpersonal relationships, trying to cope with the pressure of, having respect for your team and your team's deadlines, and also trying to write emotionally intelligent dialogue.
Yeah, I think that in retrospect, one thing that we ended up doing is like, what is the worst versions of all these? And that I feel like it's represented very well in the alpha version. Even with this current version of who your ex is, whose name in this version is Braxton, I believe. And
Brax.
Good old Brax. And you saw from the choice that Francesca made earlier, the conversation starts with him immediately gaslighting. Like, he's like, I didn't know you were in time. Oh, I texted you. You didn't get a text. That wasn't a thing that happened. Like, and him just kind of putting the blame on you as to why you didn't stay in contact, and he's kind of a jerk. And that's not who Dante, who we will see, or did we just see?
No, I'm about to jump to it. Yeah.
Dante, who we'll see differently, is very, very, very different person, because he's just a cool guy who loves experimental theater.
Cool. I love Dante.
One thing that I noticed today as we were preparing for this retrospective stream is that I was listening to a lot of Hamilton when we made this, so it makes so much sense that Dante likes theater.
Yeah, it's true. That's absolutely correct.
All right, so now we are meeting Dante, who is the final version of the X conversation.
He no longer Brax. You'll also notice that we made the characters more like the character designs, like their racial identities are different in the current version because we made the conscious choice to make the characters more closely reflect the backgrounds of our team.
Yeah. I think
which was really important for us as we were rethinking character designs and character backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that was something that was always on our mind, but I think, yeah, in the alpha, we like accidentally ended up with characters that were like, I don't know, like ambiguously brown, right? Of just like, you know. And I think we realized as we were writing these characters that their backgrounds, right, and like their identities were really important to writing fleshed out full characters. Yeah, so I feel like the characters are a lot stronger now because like we know who they are or where they might be coming from. Do you want to speak more to that, Jordan? Yeah.
I will in a moment. I saw a comment in the chat and I'm gonna make a really bad joke about it. They asked if it's Dante from Devil May Cry, and I swear this isn't in the game, you'll never hear it, but in my brain he has the sweetest voice and it will make you cry.
Aww.
The moment he begins to sing, it'll just like I said, listen to a lot of Hamilton. But,
I love Dante.
And in that, I actually do not remember what you just asked me, Francesca.
It's okay.
Just talking about reassessing the backgrounds of the characters for the release version.
So that was. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
That was a very important decision from the beginning, because it just there's so many teams out there that don't do that, right? That either reflect the people that make them or ignore the other people. And we are a small team that had complete creative control of this, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be allowed to see ourselves or see versions of ourselves or see people that kind of represent us in some type of way in this game. It was super important, and I'm pretty happy with what we did, because even just from their physical appearance, but even from like the way that the bar looks and the type of art that hangs in the bar is more reflective of Steph's background. Who Sam is more representative of her background. The types of things that she says about her parents, the way that she would talk was really conscious, and the way that she does not talk was also a conscious decision. And that made each character not only represent us, but feel more like real people.
100%. We just had a lot more in-depth conversations. I remember you spent a while just hashing out these huge character bibles of things that again we're never going to see, like the kinds of things that Jimmy has in his apartment, like the things that are in his trash can, like the little things that actually show us who they are. Jordan just put so much thought and energy and care into truly thinking through who each of these people are. And like I said, you're going to see 5-10% of it at best through these conversations. But just because you're not seeing those things in the actual dialogue doesn't mean that they're not being utilized. All of that character background really shines. And I think that's the biggest difference between the alpha and the release for the narrative is not only is the narrative so much more in depth, you wrote so much more. There are so many more conversational paths. It lasts so much longer, but also, we keep saying, the characters feel human. The characters feel so much more real because you were able to take a step back and really reflect and really decide who these characters are, who they represent. I remember we would have conversations about because Sam is a white girl from the Midwest, and so look at me, white girl from the Midwest. So we were like, hey, how would your family react in this situation? What kind of names would your grandparents have? That kind of thing felt to me also very, very heartwarming, knowing that that I my experience mattered.
Yeah.
Even if I wasn't the one writing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I wanted all of us to feel some type of representation in this game, that we could all contribute. So I would ask people on the team, like, even things that were about characters that had nothing to do with their experience, like, does this joke feel right to you? Does this X feel right to you? And like, you look at Caleb in the alpha version, and the highest extent to what we know about his background is that he went through a breakup/divorce. And with Caleb, I know that what he has for breakfast on Saturday. I mean, with Jimmy, I know what he has for breakfast on Saturdays. He has what he calls a super cereal, where he mixes 2 cereals at once. So like that it's like funny and cute, but that tells me who he is truly on the inside, and why, you know, he's different from just some guy trying to hook up with anyone that he can at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's bored, he's lonely.
We got a comment in chat if we could get a spin-off game following Dante's theater career, or at least some like supplementary materials so that folks can do their own stage production of I forget what the name of the play is, but
the name's gonna stick to my heart right now.
Okay.
The name was never said, and that's gonna be one of those things that's gonna just stay with me.
Yeah.
But if someone gave me a
lore.
budget, if someone gave me a nice budget, I would absolutely both write and star and direct a stage production where I will be in a peanut butter jar.
I love it. Would there actually be peanut butter in the jar?
I'm
or
starting
would
a
it be just,
Kickstarter.
like, costume designed to look like peanut butter?
So there has to be some amount of peanut butter in there, and like I imagine my nemesis would be in Nutella, right? Because he would have to like kind of be an analog to me. But
is that the person responsible for the string of serial murders?
That's what we need to find out.
Oh my goodness.
I need to know.
I'm starting a GoFundMe for this right now. So.
This is all inside jokes for if you've actually played the game that has not released yet. Sorry about it.
Yeah, but I did want to say, I think every time we stream, people are like, oh, are you going to make a sequel? Or are you going to, I don't know, make more content? We might, maybe, but it will depend on, you know, how this game is received. So please wishlist it on Steam, and please check it out when it launches on July 16th, which is this coming week. Yeah, super excited. Cool. I also wanted to ask, because like we're actually getting to the end of the game, and I think we didn't want to show the endings. Is that right?
I'm cool with the alpha ending.
Okay.
I think we can show the conclusion conversation. Just we'd rather not show the actual conclusion, the cinematic. Yeah, that's right. We got cinematics.
Yeah.
That is one of the big differences between the
budget
alpha
game
and the current version. Was we went, and you'll see the way the alpha ends. I wish we could actually. There are still probably hotkeys to show all of the different endings, but that even might be a little. Would that be spoilery? Because like the endings are quite different. There are still 9 endings in the alpha. But you know,
I just don't remember how to get to what those hotkeys are.
They were the number pad. Just 1 through 9.
Maybe, yeah.
Once it shows up, yeah. Yeah. Rob, FMV ending cinematic, yeah. That's we all just recorded it. It was Jordan wearing the peanut butter costume, full motion. We had
y'all have no idea how much
Sam Barlow direct.
Like,
yeah.
That would have been the unspoken ideal version of what that would be for me.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
I'm gonna go ahead and swap back. We'll take a look at the alpha ending. Here we are.
Cool. So no cinematics for y'all. Sorry about it.
But you'll be able to
You get
to
to play. Yeah, you get to play on your own. Wishlist now on Steam. Even if you kickstarted us, please wishlist us on Steam and then review on the day of launch.
I really love during this text conversation, he's just like staring at you.
That was one of the reasons that we changed. I mean, among other things, one of the reasons why we changed it so that you actually are looking at a phone, because it's very not fun to have this man just staring at you the entire time. Yeah. Especially the stranger, where he might have hit on you or something, and you're saying get away, and then you're just looking at the phone,
sitting there like this, like kind of slap ya. Yeah, it was. I mean, and you'll see, especially after the end, when you like there's like sort of the ending movement toward the door because you exit the bar for some reason, and then the ending pops up. But yeah, like it just feels so much more natural just to be staring at your phone on the bar, right? Like that's how a lot of us sit. It's like, you know, we'll put our phone, which you can't see because it's always invisible, and we just sit there and we're just staring at it. It's like drinking and like looking and drinking and looking. It just feels so much more like a real experience that you would have. It is a simulation of sitting at the bar and having weird conversations with people. Or a survival game, according to Google.
Yeah. I mean, will our relationship survive?
Will your relationship survive the night? That is one of our taglines.
This conversation with Sam reminds me of how far she's come, because we passed it a little bit, but you know, one of the things is like, how are we doing? And you respond, I think we should like, you know, hash some things out. And the way that she responds is better late than never, right? Which is like
so
totally
aggressive.
like aggressive and just not what we wanted to do. And here's the movement.
Yeah, so that was like, well, how did we get over here? What happened?
We ran really fast.
We did. We had like 6 models of the protagonist in the game that we would just turn on and off and then move the camera to it. It's like, that's natural, right? That feels not weird.
It worked for the time frame, but I'm glad we updated
it worked for what we were trying to do, but it definitely is jarring. It's like there's no explanation as to why we suddenly hop across.
Can we talk about this part where you have choices but they aren't choices?
Oh yeah.
There's no choices.
So this was, so these ending conversations we wanted to, and we do this a little bit, spoilers, still in the release, but throughout the entire game, you're given so many options, right? Like there's 27 on average different options for every single response. And then, but the fact is, you do make choices. And those choices do lead you to a place. Like you don't just have unlimited responses all the time. And so by the time the ending conversation turns out, by the time Sam has made her choice about how your relationship will turn out, those options are suddenly much more limited. And so in this particular case, for this ending in the alpha, there is no choice. Yeah, there is no choice. You can only say, I don't love you. And this is one of the more impactful endings. That people will comment on and be like, holy shit, like that, I did not see that coming. That was really painful for me to say, even though you've been a jerk the entire time to get that ending. Like it's amazing once the agency is taken away from you, once you have no choice but to be a jerk, suddenly being a jerk hurts.
Sometimes you have to lay in the bed that you've made.
Yep.
I was
lay in the bed you pooped in.
I was so mean.
Yeah. So local bar up in flames. So this was actually this was a throwback to one of our original design concepts, because one of our early bartender design concepts was a time traveling game where you would be the bartender and having these conversations that we were talking about earlier in the stream. But no matter what you did, by the end of the game, the bar would burn down at midnight unless you could save it.
Yeah.
And so then it was like Groundhog Day, and you would have to go back and keep having conversations to try to figure out what you could do, what you could say to change the fate of the bar.
I would love to make that game someday. It's a very different game.
Such a cool idea in theory, and like it could have used the exact same mechanic of trying to figure out like what was going on in the bar. It was very much a almost a murder mystery, but it was like an emotional intelligent murder mystery. In that like, what do I have to do to prevent somebody from like knocking the candle over? But this was a reference to that in particular, where, you know, local bar up in flames was a throwback to that original concept. Do you want to go through the original 9 endings, or do you feel like that's too spoilery?
I'm fine. I think that this is the one that
like a couple of them maybe,
that sets the stage for what all of the ones are for the alpha. So I think it's fine to look like I don't remember all the original alpha endings, but I know that few, if any, of them really represent what the other ones end up being.
Yeah. And these illustrations, by the way, these were by Kat Aguiar, who was the character designer. She did like the concept art and did the character like concept designs for the current release. And she moved to Japan to go teach English. And so, she's no longer part of the active team because she is living her best life. So she did these really cute ending cards. So can you press those number keys and see if you can change the endings, or is that no longer hooked up?
Is it numpad?
It should just be 1 through at the top. It should just be 1 through 9 at the top. No, does not work. No. We may have unhooked it for the H build. It's okay.
Yeah.
Trust that there was one where like you went to the carnival together or something, and there was like a cute picture of Sam like holding a giant stuffed bear.
Yeah.
We're like, yeah, they would like to go to the carnival, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what else. One where you moved in together. One where, gosh, there's
one where you and Caleb hook up.
And
oh yeah.
And you all got together.
Oh yeah.
No, with the bartender, right?
Yeah, that's one of that too.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this version, you can hook up with everybody, and that's not what current Reach Talk is about. But in this version,
yeah, I think we were, very much looking to like visual novel and like dating sims for a lot of inspiration. So when we were thinking about the endings, we were like, you should be able to hook up with everybody, and like, if you kind of went down that route, and kind of exploring how that would adjust your existing relationship, right, if any. But yeah, and I think like we kept a little bit of that in the final, but not to this extent. Yeah.
Your relationship still remains malleable based off of the options that you take during the game, but it's not so like I'm looking for the bartender route like this game could be.
Yeah. Do you want to switch back to the other menu screen and we can take some questions if folks have them?
Yeah. Wait, it's starting.
The menu screen that actually looks like our current game, not the alpha, but the flaming pumpkin. That's another reference to the bar burning down at midnight because of Cinderella's midnight peril.
I thought that was
so. That was
cute,
the name of the bar was the flaming pumpkin, and Nobo made that neon sign for it. That was one thing that we had to abandon, was the name of the bar, because it just didn't make sense. And like especially with the aesthetic we were going for, but folks really. They are nice napkins, right? Sorry, I'm reading from the chat. We love Nobo's napkins.
I feel like every time we're on the screen, Carol's like, did y'all see the napkins?
Did y'all see? I'm very proud of
so
Nobo
nice.
for doing those napkins. I am so into these napkins. And Nobo needs to. There's like a little grenadine stain from our 5 tiny shot glasses.
That's
right there.
So funny.
It's like, I love the napkins, Nobo.
Can I play the
I remember when we
credits
first-
also? Can I do that?
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, the credits. And this is actually gonna have
I usually hoard a lot of napkins whenever I go to a bar, so that's why I put that many napkins there.
Yeah.
So some of you might see your names in here, because I think this is the version where we added
It is.
Kickstarter backer names to the credits.
Oh, is it okay
Yeah.
to play these now? That's fine, I think.
Yeah.
Just let it roll.
Yeah. So these are thanks to our Kickstarter backers. This is so many Kickstarter backers.
Yeah, I guess
if
like
you submitted your backer kit survey by what was that, July 2nd, then your name is in these credits for the release version.
Yeah.
And I've still got to figure out why some of the characters are looking weird like that, but
it might be like an
hopefully I'll
accent.
figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's
be
me.
you.
Yeah, but while I let this run, can we answer any other questions or other questions about the game? I guess while we wait for questions, since we were talking about this before the stream, I was wondering if we could talk about like some of the. We mentioned this earlier a little bit, but some of the game concepts or mechanics that we ended up not using that we initially prototyped. Because we did prototype, I think, like 10 different mechanics of like how we could navigate dialogue and conversations. So Yeah, I wanted to talk about some of the silly ones.
One that comes to mind for me is that an earlier version of this game was, like Francesca said earlier, it wasn't like a bite-sized or smaller experience. It was, we were all thinking about what would this be for like a very large experience. So the idea was your whole day, and what that would be like. So one of the mechanics that we did was like creating words by picking alphabets out of your cereal with, you know, alphabet letters in there, and that I remember. And in retrospect, how would that work? I don't even know. we didn't figure it out. Which was here.
Yeah.
But that was one that stands in mind. Go on.
That idea where you're sitting in a bus and then you're just looking out of the window and like
trying to catch words in the air.
Yeah. My God.
Yeah, a lot of stuff that like we were trying to come up with mechanics that represented the emotions that you were feeling during certain conversations was the big goal with that, but ultimately we felt that took away from the conversation in a lot of ways, and also just trying to do too much at once didn't feel true to the goal of that creative challenge that we were talking about, this idea of creating a game that addresses relationships in a natural and human way. And so once we found this one mechanic that felt like conversation, we're like, oh wow, okay, well let's just do this. Like let's keep like honing in on this particular mechanic and make this one good, other than making a whole bunch of kind of okay or mediocre or subpar mechanics that are just trying to do too much at once. I think that was also feedback that we got from our mentor, was just like, don't try to do everything, try to do one thing really well. And that helped a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, that's so difficult. Like at this point, we've been making games for quite a few years, but it's always difficult to scope down your ideas. And like when you want to be creative, you want to put all this cool stuff in there, but I think like we really benefited from finding one thing that was really interesting, one mechanic that was really strong and that we could use for this experience, and I think that benefited the whole game. So
yeah, absolutely. I know we had talked about this a little bit before the stream, but Francesca, do you want to talk at all about the pen pal princess?
Yeah, some of the before we even had that specific idea, like we were playing with this idea of like making a sort of relationship satire kind of game, of thinking about like what are the stresses or things that you would deal with in like modern relationships, or specifically we were thinking a lot about texting, right, and about texting conversations and communication, and I remember there was one prototype before Pen Pal Princess that was about like you talking to people on your you're like Skyping people and trying to talk to people on your phone, but you were trying to make yourself seem like way cooler and more put together than you actually were. So we had this prototype where like it's a hand with a phone, and it's like you're doing like a video call with someone, and you have to like not show them all like the garbage that's behind you in your room, and you're trying to make yourself look really good.
Yeah.
I think like that was just like such a funny sort of mechanic. But I think when we were thinking about like what would this turn into as a larger game, it was like a lot of like smaller mini games, right?
Yeah, what was interesting was a few different games in that class section, like not from our team but from others, also utilized the texting concept, which was an interesting thread throughout. Because I mean, obviously that was before COVID and lockdown and remote working and stuff, but we were still thinking a lot about communication moving to phones and to digital spaces. And so I think that that's really interesting that was such a theme throughout that semester.
Yeah, and so when we were exploring this idea of like, using digital communication to present yourself as something that you're not, we came up with this concept of Pen Pal Princess, where you're a princess locked in a tower somewhere, and you were like writing letters or like texting or something, but basically you're communicating with like potential like princess and princesses who are outside of the castle, and you're basically convincing them to come rescue you, but you have to it's basically like online dating, right, where you're trying to convince them that you're like really great and whatever, so that they'll come rescue you.
It was a lot about like code switching and
Yeah.
making sure that you matched the way that they would talk and things like that.
And
But
yeah,
that,
and the way
we
that
didn't
they
really
think,
get very far.
yeah, the way that they think about you as well, right? Of like
Yeah.
meeting their expectation of like how you're presenting yourself. Yeah, I think that's like such an interesting idea, and I think we explored that with We Should Talk as well, right? Of like, you know, how are you expressing yourself and how are you communicating? But yeah, one day maybe I'll make that game.
Yeah.
What is your
best dating advice? From the
Be
chat.
yourself. No.
Yeah.
Honest communication is
Honest
always
communication.
important,
Honest
so that you are on the same
communication,
page.
empathy, having understanding for the other person, and like not assuming, like assume that things are being done in good faith and do things in good faith. Like
These
be
are also
good.
these are also all of my when people ask me best working in game dev advice, it's the same list. Like good communication, empathy, yeah. Absolutely.
I think it's just good life advice, right? Like assume people mean well, assume good intentions, communicate your needs and communicate your thoughts clearly and well. Yeah.
Oh, also, if you chose the movie this time, they get to first dibs on the movie the next time, but only if they have a movie choice.
That's true. Yeah. All right. When writing, did you run into issues with your own backgrounds or anything in conversation theory? I'm not entirely sure I grok that question.
I think what they're asking is like similar to what I was talking about with the Jimmy conversation, like running into situations where like my personal experience doesn't line up with what these people are experiencing when I have to do research. And that happened pretty much with every conversation.
Yeah.
Where, you know, research and conversations with other people, with people on the team, with people in our general vicinity, friends, colleagues, mentors, like informed how all those conversations would go about. Because like I didn't want, this game is a personal game for all of us in many ways, but I didn't want this game to, the characters to completely reflect my personal experience. So in order to get the experiences of other people and try to make sure I'm giving them their justice, it was really important to talk to the team members specifically, but also other people around me to make sure that I was doing justice. But also a lot of playtesting and getting people in the people that we've done. These people might want to play this game. Do they feel like this is sounding right to what they would want to experience or relate to them?
Yeah. So they're elaborating that conversation is like the idea of how conversations work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like we should talk is interesting because it's always one-on-one conversations, right? I mean, like I think usually that's the types of conversations you see in games. I don't think it's very often that you see like three-way or more conversations, which is interesting actually now that I'm thinking about it. But yeah, I think like the key things were that we really had to establish like who are these characters, what are their shared experiences, what are the emotions that they're having about those experiences, and then figuring out like are those emotions or opinions in conflict? Are they the same? Are they different? And sort of how each character is going to be reacting to that. And I think it was important, like as we were writing this, that all the characters do have history and do have some sort of like conflict that they're sort of navigating with each other. But sometimes that conflict is internal, right? It's internal in the characters as well. It's not necessarily like interpersonal conflict.
Jumping off of that, going back to the alpha version, or even the pre-alpha version, where we were just brainstorming and testing out ideas. When we originally had the idea that all these other mechanics that we were talking about, where each character that you speak to has a different mechanic that you then learn. And the concept of that, the idea behind that, is that you have to kind of learn how to talk to other people and how to talk, and everyone has the way that they want to talk to. But how that came out in the current version is that can all be done with just the same mechanic. Just everyone wants to be spoken to a specific way. Everyone has certain things that they're comfortable with and not comfortable with. And narratively, you can kind of branch that out without having to do a ton of mechanics to do that. And that's kind of the way that we decided on how the progression of the game went and how the conversations would work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So before we wrap up the stream, because we've now played through both versions, I wanted to, just kind of, I guess, like celebrate the team and the skills that we've developed over time. Yeah, I'm super excited and super proud of us. But yeah, I was curious for each of you if there's, I guess, one thing you learned, like the biggest thing you learned working on this project, or maybe the skill that you developed the most or saw the most improvement in. I'm curious.
For me, so when we went from oh, hello, sorry, my cat is behind me yelling.
Invisible cat.
When we went from, like, so during the alpha, my core role was writing, and during beta and release, my core role has been production and development. So like a lot of the development that's happened, so like Jack did all of the development for the alpha and wasn't available for a lot of the beta, and so that was Cheska, you and I took on a lot of that, and I wound up being like making the vast bulk of the developmental changes, like the programming changes between the first and the current version. I did not think I could do it. Like, I've never been super confident in my ability to be a programmer, and it was really amazing. I mean, like, in part it was because Jack's code was just so clear and like so well organized, but also like I remember just being so shocked and excited and like stoked, like, oh my god, I can do it. Like, not that I hadn't already made like dozens of games on my own. Sorry, this is my cat just like hanging out on my shoulder. I'd made dozens of games, but like for some reason I just didn't, like, I was like, I can't hang, like I can't actually do a real game.
I remember
which,
during,
you know, what is a real game?
Yeah, I remember during Incubator when you started taking on more of the like engineering tasks. I think like you would always, and like coming from production, right, as well, like I think you would always say like, oh, like I'm gonna estimate because I don't really know how to do this. I'm gonna estimate it's gonna take me like a whole week, and then you would like get that shit done in like an afternoon. Yeah. We're all like, that's awesome. So yeah.
And it was just like mind blowing to me that like, oh wow, I can do this. I can, yeah. But also with production, like we, you know, our goal was, I think our original goal was to release in February, but even the fact that we're releasing in July amidst COVID and everything is just, I feel very proud that we were able to sign with a publisher, get console like get everything on consoles for ready and, you know, all good to go, and then get a release date set and be actually launched on all of the consoles. I mean, like, thanks to Whitethorn Digital for doing all of the console porting and everything, and like working so hard to make sure that we could do this simultaneous launch. But like that too, like I just feel like so accomplished as a producer to have done that, like as my first like major production role. So yeah, this game has been amazing for me. Y'all want to jump in?
I can go. I had never done any full-time narrative design / writing before, and this gave me the opportunity to do that in a very large capacity. To the point where I learned like the things that stress me out about writing and the things that I like. I learned that like when I came up with Daddy Daycare, it took me like 20 minutes to write again because I was just giggling about that for like 20 whole minutes. And then when I'm, and even this week when I'm, or these past couple weeks where, you know, I'm incorporating Kickstarter back orders into the drink menu and customized drink orders and stuff. And I realized how like the orders of a couple of people add like 6 different like conversation points to a thing, and how like easy it was to map out and hard it was to execute still. Learning my own writing style when it comes to like choice-based branching narrative was kind of what grew out of this experience. Like defining what that is for me and how I interact with that and how I think about those is what kind of came out of this project.
And can I just say that you heckin' killed it. Like, your writing improved like so much over the course of 2 years, and has been so inspiring to see like the way that you like the way that you were able to just like create this world out of this really rough concept that we started with is just like, I'm still in awe at how much you did. Like, it's incredible, and I feel like, yeah, you absolutely deserve so many accolades for that.
Yeah, it's so funny. When you started doing that, I clicked away from the video chat, so I didn't have to see your face while you're doing that because that was emotional. And I go into the chat and I see what I assume was another family member, and I'm like, oh, I'm just surrounded by people. Thank you. You know.
We love you, Jordan.
Thanks for the people in the chat that gave me.
Yeah. Nova, would you like to go next?
Okay, so this was really huge for me because when we did alpha, I was very reluctant on doing a lot of things because I was very inexperienced, and this was my first time in game development, and I was learning so many things all at once, and I was really grateful, and I was really scared when my teammates suggested me to be the art director for this game, but I'm very proud of myself for doing so much, or like managing to do so much, even though I had to learn a lot while I don't know how to do this, but I'm really glad that a lot of people helped me out. A lot of professors did. My teammates uh, had enough patience to bear with my mistakes, but
We all do it.
I still managed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, again, like watching you grow throughout this process, like, and seeing how hard you worked, like you would. So Nobo and I lived together during the incubator phase of this project, which was last summer. And we would work full 8-hour days, 5 days a week. And then she would come home and keep working. And I'm like, stop working. She's like, no, I really want to. And she just loved this project and cared so much about it and wanted it to be good. Like her goal was like, I want this to reflect the best of me. And you can see that. I mean, like just looking at the alpha to the release, like even the menu screen,
So much.
like
Oh my God.
the aesthetic has just improved dramatically. Even like look at this, like these images behind us. Like you want to exist in this place, and this is all Nobo. Like Nobo handcrafted every single item that you see in all of these background images, and lit every single item, and was like so meticulous about the colors and the lighting and the aesthetic. Like the way that you made this space that felt like a slapped together student project become this beautiful bar that I want to go to within months was amazing.
Yeah.
And also look at those napkins.
Look at those napkins. Yeah, I did want to say as well that and this is related to what I was gonna say as my thing, but I think our entire team, but Nobo, you especially, I think have like your the way that you express yourself and that you talk about this game. I think like compared to when we all first met many years ago, and you like introduced yourself and you were extremely shy and you didn't really want to talk about yourself, and now I see you as being, you know, much more confident where you can like talk about this work that you did in your project and like really showcase it. So I wanted to say also that that like you've done an awesome job like representing this project as well. Yeah, and yeah, and that's also related to what I was gonna say as sort of like my skill that I've developed. I think that, and I think this is the case for everyone, but I think we've gotten so much more experienced at talking about our work and talking about our game, and really having like insightful conversations about our design process and about the content. Like this live stream is an example of that, I think, where we could talk for hours about, you know, how we worked on this and how we thought about the content and how we worked through problems. So I think that's an extremely valuable thing to get out of a project, and I know that that'll really benefit all of us moving forward in our careers with other games. So yeah,
I think it's worth noting, like, also, thank you for running all of these streams and like leading the conversation on all of these streams, because it's super wonderful, and like you're a badass with broadcasting.
Thank you.
But now I've lost my train of thought. Damn it. I was gonna say something else that was about video games. And
video games, you say?
Something. But I interrupted myself, and now I forget.
That's the nuance of conversation.
Yeah.
The nuance of conversation.
We can come back to it. But speaking of future games and careers and projects, we had a question in chat, but are there any other upcoming projects from people on the team that you might want to plug or talk about?
Because I am on top, I will go first, I guess. I paused to think about what I should talk about. I have contributed to the video game adaptation of the HBO show Insecure, called Insecure, the come-up game. So I would say look out for that. Follow Glow Up Games on Twitter and Instagram and all those things, and Insecure, the come-up game, and look out for that. Coming soon is the game that I can talk about.
But Jordan has also been working on some really cool stuff that they can't talk about, which is really exciting. So you should follow Jordan on Twitter so that when they can talk about it, that you see it.
And this is why Carol's a good producer, because she remembers things that I don't.
Yeah, but like it's really cool and like amazing and wonderful.
When I can talk about it, you'll hear about it a lot.
Nice.
Yeah, you will.
I can go next, I guess, on the list. So I'm working on some other independent projects. Recently released a game called Starcrossed, which is a 2-player cooperative action arcade game about magical girls in space. And you can find that on Steam and on Switch and on Xbox One. So please check it out if you're looking for a game to like play with friends and family. Something else that I'm working on a lot right now is I work with an organization called Code Coven, and we teach online game development and coding classes. So I've been really excited about the classes that we're running with through Code Coven and the various like initiatives that we're working on. So if you're someone who is like interested in getting started making games, or you just want to support that work, you can find us on Twitter and online. So that is Code Coven. Those are the things I think I can talk about right now. Yeah.
Another thing that you and I are working on together is a tabletop strategy game called Chroma, which is being published by Breaking Games. We don't have a timeline for release quite yet, but we are. Something's going to happen soon. It is a really, really beautiful tabletop game that you can find on Twitter, and we will be doing a Kickstarter for it eventually. And it's like it's a backlit color blending tabletop game. So like it's really beautiful. So I am also the executive director of Pixel Pop Festival, which is an indie game conference and expo that normally happens in St. Louis, Missouri, which is my hometown. But this year, because of pandemic, it is going to be happening entirely online, and applications are open for it. So if you are an indie game designer or developer, we accept applications for both games and talks, and that includes tabletop games, digital games, experimental stuff. We love experimental work and really want to highlight new voices in games. Otherwise, I've just been working on other projects I can't talk about, mostly in the tabletop space, which is really cool and exciting. So hopefully, keep an eye on my Twitter, which is @CarolMertz, and I will talk about stuff when I can talk about it.
Secrets.
Yeah.
Nobo?
Do you want to plug anything?
Social media.
No, I don't have much. I'm just here.
Follow Nobo on Twitter.
Yeah. One other thing to note is tomorrow we're going to be doing an AMA on Reddit on our games. So if you do think of any questions that you want to ask us, we're going to be around all weekend. So look for our Reddit post. We'll just be taking whatever questions. You can us, which means ask us anything. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, with that we've been chatting for almost 2 hours, so I think we're gonna call it here. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone who has tuned in and asked questions. We hope you enjoyed taking a look at the alpha version of We Should Talk and sort of our journey into the final version, which will be releasing on July 16th on Steam and consoles as well. So please keep an eye out. Ways that you can support us, just help us get the word out on Twitter or just social media. If you know someone who really likes narrative games and might be interested in this, let them know that this is coming out next week. You can also wishlist the game on Steam, which helps us get visibility and conquer the Steam algorithm, so folks will be able to find us more easily. So we would really, really appreciate that as well. Is that any other?
We're also available for pre-order on Xbox right now.
Yes.
We just launched that page today, which is really cool. So if you're just if you can't wait to get it just for your Xbox, I mean, we're going to be on all the consoles, but if you're specifically I need We Should Talk on my Xbox right now, you can actually give us money right now and pre-order it. I'm slapping my coffee table.
I do like money. I like money.
We are huge fans. That's why we did a Kickstarter, which again, thank you to our backers.
All right. With that, thank you again so much, everyone, for tuning in. And we will see you around. And we really hope you enjoy the final released version of We Should Talk.
And remember, never stop talking.
Oh my god.
Okay, I'm turning off the stream now.
Is it like Speed? Is it like Speed where if we stop
All right, I'm shutting it off. Bye, everyone. Goodbye.
So good. That's so good.